Please introduce yourself when you ask a question. Provide a comment.
Oh my gosh.
I'll ask one.
There you go.
Sure,
There we go.
please.
I'm Ivan Kramer. I am a physicist. Okay,
Okay.
theoretical one. How do you approach the Iranian claim that they're not after nuclear weapons, but nuclear power?
Yeah.
If you're sitting across a negotiating table with them, as opposed to the Swiss,
Right.
you have to take into
That's a good
account
question.
that we are no threat at all from
Right.
the Swiss. But given that it's a theocratic regime,
Right.
completely different from anything we've experienced in the West,
Right.
what do you do?
Okay. That is. I wish people in Washington asked that question and actually took it seriously and thought about it. My general view, and this makes me look kind of like I've got Birkenstocks, although I don't own a pair. I think you really have to make the rules roughly apply to everybody. And that when you start doing a la carte policies in this field, it's the beginning of a mess. I gave a presentation at Peking University just about 6 months ago. And they said, well, I got the recommendations section. I said, well, we need to be tougher on this, this, and this. He said, how would you do that? I said, well, I think we wrote a paper, Victor Galinsky and I recommend it. You can get it on the website, Serious Rules for Nuclear Power Without Proliferation. And it was a kind of tongue-in-cheek, but then we discovered a pretty serious paper where we said, well, what would you do if, in addition to wanting to go to zero nuclear weapons, you wanted to share nuclear power, but in a way where you could be pretty confident that you wouldn't be proliferating? Well, we went around shopping for proposals. Some of them came from here, or some of them came from other places. We stapled them together, and it was quite a list. By the way, if you did those things, and they were sensible things, they were not crazy. You could probably have nuclear power, without having problems. For example, you would say no more enrichment capacity until you have demand for it. I mean, we're building now in the world more capacity than we have demand for. We already have 30% surplus of capacity for current demand. Why are you building more? I know it's going to be different in the future. It's pretty quick to build centrifuges. You don't need a lot of lead time. Well, I'll raise eyebrows. By the way, that's China and Japan that's doing that. Wonder why. I don't know. So what we did is put those proposals together. And a lot of people, even some of the people here, said, well, you can't do that. Not everybody would agree. By the way, probably true. However, then that would suggest that if you don't want to see the spread of nuclear weapons, you stop pushing the nuclear power out the door the way you do. Or at least you tame the amount of fuel cycles for the future cooperation or screwing around. You get some idea of what you start toning down. I think for processing, I make it very clear in this book. No. It's like when a dog craps on the carpet. You say no. That's stupid. Nobody needs to do that now. I probably never, but certainly there's plenty of uranium. The spent fuel problem, I advise you to listen to Mr. Von Hippel. It's an old saw. He wasn't the first to come up with it, but he details it in excruciating detail, and he's right. So that's just no. But the enrichment is much tougher. I think there you say enough already, sort of the Yiddish approach. That's the first thing. The second thing is you start saying, these kinds of activities, you cannot have timely detection or warning of a diversion. By the way, if you doubt this, talk to someone who's in the St. Paris Department of Guiding. They will tell you this privately. They actually asked me to come to Vienna to say this every 4 years. It's weird. I'm not a big champion of the IAEA per se, but I think you need them, and they need to be more candid about what they can and can't do. So you do that. But in addition, if you can't really know about a significant bomb source being diverted before it might be turned into a bomb, you might be able to find out about it monitoring after it happened. What does that advise? You have to do a lot of monitoring just to know whether it happened after it's too late to do much about it. Okay, why don't we make the monitoring super extreme so it's expensive? Tax it. We give everyone a free ride. Not only that, Bob Gallucci, who I've started to work with on this East Asia project, wrote a piece after having a conversation with me, and he actually said something that was remarkably candid. We go pushing guards, gates, and guns to secure material, which then enables countries to say, well, we can produce as much weapons usable material as we need to because it's secure. I don't think you want to be arguing that. We need to actually not just complain about highly enriched uranium. Let me tell you, by the way, if you check, the president just announced the security conference. You can't find the P word in any of his announcement, only highly enriched uranium. This tells you something. So you start getting tougher on yourself. You tax the monitoring to make it tougher so that the entry price for others is higher. And you start saying, this is dangerous. You only do as much of it as you must do, technically, to support demand. That's a start. And yeah, you say it to the Swiss. More important, you say it to yourself. Yeah? That's the best I could come up with. I mean, it needs work, but it's a start. Does that answer your question?
I accept your answer.
Okay, well, by the way, not everyone does.
But it doesn't alleviate any anxiety that I have about what we're staring at here.
Well, that's a different matter. By the way, my read on the Iran deal is brutally glib. If you think they are not that interested in getting a bomb, you look at the deal and you go, yay! Why? Oh, it's another political barrier that locks them into not getting a bomb. And if they go ahead and get a bomb, they're going to piss off all sorts of people who went into the deal. If you think, hey, they actually do think about getting a bomb, and they actually want to get a bomb at some point, you look at this thing, and the great technical barriers that are in it, they're not that impressive. And you're a critic of it. Roughly, that's what the debate is about. What do you think about it? And so I've sort of stayed out of that for the most part. I'm waiting for the dust to settle. By the way, there are a number of things technically that we should have asked for that not even the critics are pointing out, which I find rather interesting. Talk offline about that. But the point here is that that deal could be improved, is my suspicion.
I didn't hear that last phrase of yours. Would you repeat it, please?
That deal could be improved, easily, actually.
It's obvious. You just look at the numbers.
Yeah, well, but let's not sideline this whole presentation about Iran. You and I are going to talk later. Anyone else? No.
Philip, we've met. I teach here in the non-proliferation Policy. So I sort of feel like the premise of your non-proliferation prescription is that you're sort of the boss of everything. So you're you may not enrich. You're sort of the boss of everything. It's a little bit like if I were. Well, no, but or we are, right? It's sort of like if I were running the world, I would not allow you to enrich, and I would not allow you to pursue plutonium, and I'm kind of sympathetic to that. I like the idea that we're sort of the boss of everything. But I look at the world, and I notice we're the only ones who don't think that reprocessing currently is very valuable. And so what I'm kind of wondering is, how do you get those people to agree not to reprocess, right? Is our nuclear technology, for example, so valuable that when they sign one of our agreements, they're willing to agree to those kinds of
conditions? First of all, let me give you some good news. It's not as bad as you think.
I agree.
Okay. It's even better than you think or agree. I've taken 3 trips and spent 2.5 years with Chinese, Japanese, South Korean, Russian, and American officials, nuclear engineers, and security experts. I was told, by the way, what we did for this project was, instead of talking about the economics of reprocessing and the economics of enrichment of nuclear power, which I think is it's an important point, but it's a loser because I don't think anybody's paying enough attention to that. And so, arguing that, it isn't economic for them, well, it's not. Arguably, in some cases, most cases, it's not that economic for us. And so, arguing that, I think is not a smart way to go. I said, let's just talk about bombs first. Everybody said, "Ooh, wait a minute. You know, that's a weird place to go." Well, no, wait a minute, isn't that what we're worried about? So what we did is we came up with a bunch of scenarios for the Japanese and what their force would look like day one, 15 years later, 30 years later. Did it for South Korea, ramping up China, North Korea. And then we brought them in the room. Said, take this brief, tell us what you think. I was told they wouldn't come. Then I was told if they come, they won't say anything. Then I was told if they say anything, they won't get along. None of this turned out to be true. Not one bit of it. They came, they talked, they got along, and it was really interesting. And what we learned actually will make you feel better, I think. It made me feel better. What if I was to tell you that the former director of the Chinese National Nuclear Corporation, which is the unique body that not only does fast reactors and reprocessing, but is responsible for making the bombs, doesn't think reprocessing and fast reactors is what they ought to focus on now. Too dangerous to draw down the resources on something so unnecessary now when we have to worry about the safety of the AP1000 series. Okay, so a little glimmer. What if I was to tell you that someone, I'm going to protect his name, someone extremely in charge of Japan's plutonium effort, when asked, I said, what are you going to do? Well, we have to start it. I said, what's your rationale? I said, well, the usual. And I said, yeah, but it doesn't make any sense. He said, well, I said, don't you have a better rationale? I said, maybe if the world watched us, they'd learn what not to do. Ooh. What if I was to tell you that people in that government, some of them actually are looking for ways to slow that thing down? By the way, I'm not sure they'll succeed. Okay, I'm not an idiot. What if I was to tell you that the people in Korea, when I said, and these are people actually, some of them, I think might be open to the utility of nuclear weapons. Might be. I'm going to tread carefully. What if I was to tell you that I said, well, do you want to recycle? And I said, yes. I said, well, would you want to so much if the Japanese didn't? You know what the response was? It wasn't yes or no. It was, is that possible? I think that's where the United States comes in. We have a MOX program, don't we? People know about this? It's not very pretty. It's a mess. It's been going on decades.
Hole in the ground reporting money too.
Yes, it's a mess. Even the President of the United States recognizes it, and he's not technical, but he's not looking very good. He wants to maybe come up with alternatives. Why can't we actually utter the words, can we take a time out? Maybe we don't go ahead to show you that we're not doing this. Does anybody else want to not go ahead for a while? Because everyone else has local constituencies saying we must do it. It'd be nice to have an international excuse to say, well, yeah, but we want to get this agreement. By the way, I'm not going to tell you that that's got legs. I can tell you I briefed it with other former officials and people who know a lot about weapons, 2 officials, and generally they said, this is interesting. They asked, where's the United States? You hear what I just said? Where is the United States in this? So I think what we think still matters, but you're right, you can't lecture people, and you can't tell them to do something you don't want to play. I get it. But to think that because we've overplayed our hand perhaps in the past, we shouldn't play it at all, I think is a bigger mistake. That's all. I think we're in agreement on that. That's my guess. Yeah.
Maybe you mentioned in the beginning about, so we're saying about the trend towards Asia. And
Yeah.
you mentioned in your discussion that on the one hand you're having power reactors and the US is encouraging there, but on the second hand, you had discussion with the Chinese about the missile proliferation. It's all about delivery means and its improvement.
Well, I talked to them about fizzle too, by the way. It's a big problem in China.
but-
And we're on the wrong side. We're pushing them to think that we don't care if they make lots of plutonium. I think that's a mistake. Big mistake.
But my question to you was, how do you see the non-proliferation of delivery means, especially missiles in the wake of what China is doing and other countries around that. Southeast Asia.
I'll tell you a great story. I am not going to fall for your enticement to get into Southwest Asia. You know,
Southeast Asia. It's talking about.
well, okay. No, I'm going to go north.
All right.
By the way, next big trend. What about Chinese-Russian relations? You roll your eyes. You can be writing about this, whether you like it or not. People are already beginning to do it. We had two people from Russian institutes, that's to say, nominally government employees. They were some of the most enjoyable people we had. Actually, all these people were interesting. I asked one of them, I said, how are your relations with China? By the way, right next to them were people from PLA. He said, oh, they're great. We're selling nuclear civil stuff. We got a pipeline deal for gas. We're selling them airplanes, military aircraft. We even sell them some naval stuff. And trade's kind of improving. And we have a common enemy, you. I said, terrific. That's great. How's it look a decade from now? He says, oh, a decade. Well, I think everything will be fine. But there are Russians who are not as educated as I am, who have a different opinion. These are crude people. They are not sophisticated at all. I'll tell you what they think, because you need to know there are some Russians that think differently than I do. By the way, Chinese are right there. So he says, first, these people are a little upset by some of the Chinese maps that include sort of portions of Siberia. They don't like those maps. They want the maps. They stop the maps. I said, what else? He said, well, these people, again, they're not very sophisticated people, but they don't like the Chinese spending money to teach people of, Chinese descent how to speak Chinese in Siberia. We're afraid there won't be any Russian speakers because we can't spend money to teach people how to speak Russian, like they teach people to speak Chinese. And anything else? He said, well, I have to admit that we're running out of second-tier military equipment to sell to Chinese. I don't know that we want to sell first-tier. And the gas pipeline, well, who knows how that will go. By the way, this is almost 2 years ago. By the way, it's on the rocks. It's not going anywhere. And if it does get built, we might want to get a better price. And if we don't, well, we might have to turn the gas off. And then he said, of course, we do have to worry that there are Chinese army groups in the north. But I keep telling all of my friends who say all these things, they have nothing to worry about because we can just move all of our tactical nuclear weapons into the region. By the way, Chinese did not wince. They didn't. I mean, it's like they hadn't heard this before. No comment. It's like, yes, of course. So I think, in answer to the question about missiles, look north first. By the way, you can look in lots of different directions. You can look to India. But, in the end of the day, if you want to get a good competition going, wouldn't you want to start with Russia and China if you had a choice versus India and China? They got so much more stuff to play with than you do. It's not you, you're Pakistani, but, you're representing the whole region. So, heads up. That one is something to watch. Also, it's entertaining because it gets us out of the picture. By the way, it also allows you to agree with Russians, which is very weird. For me to be sympathetic to Russian proposals about missile controls, it's fun. It's totally different. But they make very sensible proposals. One's identical to ones I made. I met a man, and I sent him to see Schultz. It was, of course, Putin wouldn't listen to this guy. You have to wait for Putin to die, perhaps. It'll take a while. But they do die. They always do. So if you think long term, there's hope. And they think thoughts. They're very smart people. So they think about that. So that's how I would look at that.
Okay.
Of course, you can look at it in exchanges with India, because at some point, India will get its stuff together.
I was to smaller countries like Vietnam and Malaysia, Southeast Asian countries.
Yeah.
Are they reacting to this or not? That's
Well, yes, but how shall I put it? India and Pakistan make them
Yeah.
look small. It's going to take a couple of weeks. But yes, in the long run, we're all going to be competing with one another if we don't watch it. Yeah.
Maybe I'll allow one more question if there is one. No? No questions?
God, such a happy
Oh,
audience.
wow. I'm tempted to ask one,
Well,
but with the
all right.
benefit of people who are living, I may ask you
Okay.
offline.
All right.
Thank you. Really
Thank you.
appreciate it.